So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and I've elected to go with the second of the two scenarios that Eclipse 2500 sent me. Now we have the version that is compatible with the replay file that he gave me, so I'm going to be able to record it now. And we are going to be seeing a mass Isengard invasion, and we're going to be seeing the forces of Arthedain, which are going to be digging in on that hillside over there. And I believe it's a 5v3 or a 4v3 or something along those lines. Might be an even. There's J, WK, Mevin again. I think there's three defenders. I mean, certainly I think the attackers are going to be outnumbering them today. There's too many Isengard forces on the field for it not to have that feel to it. I just don't know whether it's a 4 or a 5v3, but we'll figure that out as we go along, of course. Isengard here setting up their encampments over on this side of the road. Arthedain with some good defensive positions. We'll get into that a little bit more later on. I doubt we're going to be seeing the road itself or this little farmstead, certainly not this farm, used as part of the battle itself, but even still, it comes with the territory really, that a lot of these maps end up looking really rather interesting, but it is more often than not like a single third or half the map which ends up seeing the vast majority of the action. It's just an interesting little thing to note with most of these. But we will go on to the Isengard compositions now. Froggy playing as one of the attackers. Time and time again, we've seen the Uruk-hai pikemen be just such an important unit for Isengard, which should go without saying. I mean, pikemen should be a massive part of what makes Isengard a good faction. And indeed it does. We've seen them be just so effective. More often than not in these large siege battles, it's because Isengard can save them for later. The main body of the Isengard army in itself is kind of difficult to chew through with projectiles anyway, at least among certain other options that you could pick among the evil forces of Middle-earth. And then when you have a massive pikeman coming towards you in the late game with not a lot of ammunition to deal with it, it can be an overwhelming force, as we have seen. Not so much actually in the very last battle that we saw. Isengard's strength wasn't quite enough on that occasion. Their balanced nature to overcome the quality that the elves and the dwarves had on offer. We'll see if the Dunedain fare just as well. Isengard Ballista, very impressive siege, a bit of unique siege equipment, certainly more so than the runic one these days. Again, the terrain being what it is might make it a little bit difficult to get really clean shots with it, but if they can, with that flaming shot that it has, it could be a real problem for Arthedain, because if they do end up getting caught cold by it, it's a lot of damage that it can do, and it can do it very, very quickly as well. There's going to be a lot of Uruk-hai infantry on display for Isengard as well, should go without saying. A really dependable unit to have in melee. Also, actually as a line infantry, Arthedain don't really have an equivalent to this. A really bulky upper end unit of mid-tier line infantry, that sort of thing. Because they are superior to the Arthedain men-at-arms, the Uruk-hai infantry. They will do more damage, they do the job of being line infantry a little bit better. The Dunedain Peacekeepers are an interesting comparison to make. The Peacekeepers are going to be better at dealing damage. They've got a good melee defense even with their use of an axe, but the Peacekeepers, as with most Dunedain units, they're not going to have that same level of numbers or armour perhaps, which is something which really makes a really good line infantry unit very often, and the Uruk-hai infantry have that in spades. We also have some Snaga skirmishers, which are hidden here in the trees. Obviously cheap javelins are always going to be really, really efficient, because even if they end up getting shot up, they've still absorbed a lot of ammunition, but if they don't, they can also end up doing a surprising amount of damage to defensive lines, something else which Arthedain will be hoping to avoid. We'll have to wait and see what tricks they can use to try and deal with that sort of thing. Trolls the White Hand could be another important tool for Isengard, if they can use them at the right time. Arthedain, of course, are another faction which base themselves pretty heavily a lot of the time around their pikemen, certainly with their infantry. Isengard should still win an out-and-out pike war with Arthedain, just about, I would suggest. The Gate Guards may be a little bit better individually, but the standard Arthedain pikemen are not quite as good as the Uruk-hai ones, so I think Isengard should be okay with that. But just to push them over the edge in case they do need that little bit of an extra push, these Trolls of the White Hand should be exactly the sort of thing which are going to do a lot of damage to the traditionally more defensive Arthedain frontline. Stuff like the Evendim Spearmen and Arthedain Pikemen we've seen as a combination time and time again, and while it is efficient and very tough to break down, it's not the most damaging, and stuff like Trolls are going to be able to do tons of damage to the units that make it up before they end up taking casualties as well. 2 units of Nazkai is interesting, plenty of quality on display for Isengard there. Maybe it is a 4v4, I'm not sure, but to see Isengard have a lot of quality like this would maybe suggest so. And the Nazkai, of course, are a really dangerous unit for Isengard as well, just because of the extreme amount of armor-piercing damage they can do. One of the very scariest armour-piercing infantry units that the game has to offer. And Isengard don't just stop there with armour-piercing, they've got the half-orc Vanguard, which do pack on a little bit more armour than the other lower-end shock infantry units that Isengard have, which could be useful at dealing with the Arthedain projectiles, which will be a problem for Isengard. Arthedain are very good with their long-range archers. But the crossbows are the sort of thing which, again, if Isengard can anchor themselves into a good position on the hill, get their crossbows into range and get decent shots onto Arthedain, easier said than done when fighting uphill. But if they can do that, it's going to be the sort of thing which is going to pile even more pressure on to the defenders here. Uruk-hai archers, they can try and do a little bit of skirmishing with Arthedain with a unit like this, but ultimately they're going to find themselves outclassed at long range is one of the things you have to accept in most matchups really as Isengard. Maybe Angmar obviously being the obvious exception there. Wojciech has got 4 units of Uruk-hai pikemen. We'll go through the rest of the armies a little bit quickly because I can imagine Isengard are a relatively uniform faction anyway by their nature, so I can't imagine the other players have got anything too different to speak of. Several units of Uruk-hai infantry. He too has got a ballista actually, so plenty of siege at their disposal. Another unit of Trolls of the White Hand. He does have some Uruk-hai raiders, which are a more entry-level Uruk-hai unit. They lack obviously the armour and of course the damage dealing capabilities of their higher tier brethren, but they are very numerous, so it'll just help with the attackers' unrelenting pressure on the hillside. He does have a unit of Lert's hunting pack as well. This body-piercing projectile is not going to be monopolised by Arthedain on this occasion. Lert's hunting pack are a bodyguard tier unit as well after all, so a very dangerous unit this that Isengard have available to them. This really is the exception to the rule when it comes to their long-range prowess, but they're not really a skirmish archer, which is the problem. They can do a lot of damage, but if they do get caught out in the middle of nowhere, while they may be multiple HP, they're still not really substantial enough to be able to skirmish with the whole enemy line all on their lonesome. Some Nazkai in there as well, lots more Uruk-hai raiders, Eclipse 2500 and Morris over here starting to bleed into proceedings. The Uruk-hai berserkers have got a 3rd hit point, but they don't really have any other defensive attributes to speak of. Other than that, they are still the armor-piercing threat that the Nazkai are, something else which Arthedain will have to keep in mind. Eclipse has got several units of Uruk-hai pikemen back here. He too has got some berserkers, and back over there even more berserkers. The sort of thing which Arthedain will be hoping to focus down with their projectiles, I'm sure. Several units of Uruk-hai infantry. Not very often we see the Dunlending berserkers. They're probably the least brought of all of Isengard's entry-level shock infantry units. They have 3 to choose from after all, which is probably a little bit too much. One of them can probably fall by the wayside, and Isengard won't lose all that much. The reason you bring the Dunlending berserkers perhaps is the fact that they do have a heightened anti-cavalry bonus. Heavy axemen are already pretty good against cavalry if it's in sustained melee. They'll obviously get devastated on the charge, but it does make the berserkers the sort of thing you really don't want to get mixed up in sustained melee with as it pertains to cavalry. They do have the armour upgrade as well, which gives them their little helms and makes them a little bit less of a ragtag band of bandit-looking people. Uruk-hai Reavers, Dunlending clansmen with the armour upgrade as well. They do have more of a place in an Isengard roster because they're so cheap, and militia spears are obviously very much a thing in the game. And they too have that little heightened anti-cavalry bonus. More Lert's hunting pack, Trolls of the White Hand, plenty more Reavers going off down that way. We also have some Dunlending veterans here, which, again, in comparison to stuff like the Raiders, there's relatively few occasions where I'd recommend actually bringing the veterans over the Raiders generally. The extra damage can be somewhat helpful against some factions. The anti-cavalry bonus can maybe be a reason to bring them as well if you want a cheap unit of infantry, which is a little bit more dangerous for cavalry to try and deal with, but again, when you're fighting in a scenario, it doesn't really matter. I do like the look of the Dunlenders though. They've got a very understated look, but it's kind of cool. Uruk-hai crossbowmen, more archers as well, so yeah, that is pretty much it. A bit of a Dunlander presence as we went along, but mostly it's a pretty strong Isengard army. I'd say Froggy actually has probably the strongest one overall. It seemed like he had more of a heavier Uruk-hai presence. His allies had to make do with some gaps in that particular roster, but it is a 4v3 perhaps, or maybe a 4v4, we'll have to wait and see. But now, Arthedain, at the base of the hill, some upgraded Arthedain pikemen. I mean, they will still be able to withstand a really decent amount. If you're going to base your defence around something, pikes are such a reliable thing to do so. And it's not as if the initial assault from Isengard is going to use their pikemen, or at least it shouldn't, because they're going to immediately be gather the attention of all of Arthedain's skirmishers that are able to shoot them. So initially, the Arthedain pikemen might be a pretty difficult foe for Isengard to try and bust their way through. We'll have to wait and see. Several units of Dunedain Peacekeepers. This, of course, was the unit I was just talking about. I mean, they are armoured decently enough, but when you compare them to the more numerous and more bulk-focused Uruk-hai infantry, in comparison to the slightly more finesse-focused and damage-focused, shall we say, Peacekeepers, as line infantry, I would argue the Uruk-hai infantry fill that role better, but the Dunedain Peacekeepers are more of a niche unit anyway, and they're going to be very capable, especially against the entry-level units that Isengard have here. That extra damage is going to be a real problem for them, so they will have to be careful there. Dismounted Knights of Numinous, they will be quite vulnerable against the bodyguard units from Isengard, just because of all of the armour piercing they bring to the table, but other than that, outside of the armour piercing units, it's going to be difficult for Isengard to deal with them in melee any other way, because they are an incredibly tanky unit of sword and shield bodyguard infantry. Evendim Archers going to be ready to do some damage on the approach. Very efficient unit of archers in pretty much every situation. Fully upgraded Evendim Spearmen as well, making up a bit of a defensive force around this initial part of the hill. Moving a little bit further back, we'll get into some even more Dunedain Peacekeepers from Mevon, so plenty of damage dealing potential from the Dunedain elements of this army. Some dismounted Fornosterine Knights, again, not armour piercing, but the base damage on them is going to be more than sufficient to give pause to an awful lot of what Isengard have. Isengard will be thanking the fact that a lot of their Uruk-hai have got the armour, however, to mitigate that damage a little bit, but even so, like, the Uruk-hai infantry are still not going to be enjoying going up against a shock infantry of that quality. Evendim Archers, plenty of Evendim Archers actually. Arthedain Men at Arms, we've already spoken about how the Uruk-hai infantry are better than them, even with the armour upgrades. The Arthedain Men at Arms are only really going to be a bit of a stopgap. Other things are going to have to do the damage and win this battle for Arthedain if they are going to go on to win it. Numinous Gate Guards at the centre of a bunch of Evendim Spearmen, another unit of dismounted knights of Numinous. I have to say, I'm not seeing a huge amount of Arthedain's fabled archers at this point. Arthedain Men at Arms has plenty of Evendim archers, but they're very basic in nature. Arthedain Marksmen here are a little bit better, but even so, still defensive in nature. The Trebuchet is here, but Trebuchet is something that I would be keeping under wraps until those Ballistae have either exhausted themselves or not used any ammunition on your infantry line, because if you send it out into the open now, all you're going to accomplish is getting it destroyed. Got some Fornosterine Knights over here as well. Obviously all of the Dunedain units can hide, so maybe I'm doing a bit of a disservice here to the compositions that Arthedain have. Rangers and Troll Slayers in particular, of course, can hide anywhere, so that is something worth bearing in mind as we move on to Tundra's Fox and his army. He too has got some Evendim Spearmen, once again fully upgraded, so they're going to be fairly resilient with all the armour that they're packing on here, Arthedain. Arthedain Marksmen, looks like 2 units of Numinous Gate Guards over here, so this is actually a pike line that will give the Isengard one some pause. The Numinous Gate Guards, an impressive unit to be sure, the equivalent of the Wardens of Tyr and Gorthad and Franadai pikemen from the other Arnorian petty kingdoms. Even more Arthedain Men at Arms. There are some Troll Slayers over here that are not hidden, and that's because the general's in them, so they have been revealed, but they're still a very dangerous unit. Those javelins and those axes capable of dishing out an incredible amount of damage. One of the single most scary units Isengard could be facing, to be honest with you. Their only saving grace is they have limited ammunition, and ultimately, while they are even resilient thanks to their second hit point, they are a Dunedain unit which doesn't have all that much armour, so if you can isolate them, they can fall by the wayside. And then another Trebuchet unit. Now there could be other units a little bit further back here. I mean, there's actually 2 Trebuchets over here, so J, it is a 4v4. That actually explains a good amount, I would say, about how good those Isengard armies are, and about how Arthedain are having to make do with quite a lot of low to mid tier units to have to try and put this defence on. It's not they don't have any quality. They've got dismounted Knights of Numinous, they've got some Dunedain here and there, they've got plenty of Trebuchets as well, which, with the terrain advantage they have, especially up here, the Isengard ballistas will have to go through some dangerous terrain in order to be able to counter snipe them, but we'll have to wait and see on that. It's going to be an interesting one. This a 4v4 scenario is a bit kinder on the defenders, but Isengard have got so much quality, and Isengard in general have got a lot of tools that are going to be really useful against Arthedain that I wouldn't want to predict this one, to be honest with you. So let's just see where this goes, shall we? I will make a little bit of a cut, because I would imagine Isengard are going to take a little bit of time to march down that hill and across the road, but I'll rejoin when inevitably Arthedain will probably open proceedings with an archer volley or 2. So this is rather interesting. I didn't expect the battle to be beginning in this fashion, as an Arthedain force attempts to move along the road here and get into a different position. So obviously this is part of the rules of the scenario, that this Arthedain army has to move this way, otherwise digging in on the hillside would certainly be the better option. But I'm not really sure how this is going to go, because Isengard do look to be dragging their heels a little bit more than Arthedain were. Arthedain looking as though they're in slightly better shape here, and also some trebuchet fire immediately starting to come down from the high ground. But any friendly fire is also likely to send the Arthedain forces running, especially when you consider some of the stronger Isengard units are going to be coming in, causing a bit of panic in the Arthedain ranks. But yeah, Trolls of the White Hand, There are some Dunedain Peacekeepers moving forward, but this is mostly just rank and file Arthedain units, which are going to struggle when the stronger Isengard forces arrive. As I said, Dunedain scouts coming down the road. They're going to be trying to get some good glancing shots into the Isengard forces. The pikemen definitely going to be one of the first ports of call for this ammunition. Some bandits in and amongst the Arthedain forces. That little bit of armour piercing they offer will be useful at cracking through the Uruk-hai armour, but already you can see WK's army is being overlapped. Dunedain scouts are going to move forward. Will they charge directly, or will they continue to just use their ammunition? They may just charge in here, because this Arthedain force is a little bit exposed. Horse archers certainly don't have the best charge. You can see several of them falling by the wayside as they hit the Uruk-hai, and not really enough to make too much of an impact there. So the charge didn't really connect as well as you could, but horse archers almost entirely reliant on their mass to do damage off the charge like that. Continuing to see elements of the trebuchet fire coming in. The frame rate struggling a little bit with all of these unit models in close proximity and battling with one another. Projectiles flying overhead as well. Dismounted Knights of Illuminus and Dunedain Peacekeepers will also help out for the quality stakes for Arthedain. Moving a little bit further up the hill. I mean, this is the kind of fight that the Dunedain Peacekeepers will really like against, especially if they get into something as weak as the Uruk-hai archers in melee. The problem they will have is that they are having to deal with a significantly scarier unit in the Uruk-hai Berserkers as well. But, I mean, even the Berserkers, as soon as their hit points are expended, the damage that the Peacekeepers can lay down will actually be useful, but unfortunately they are a fresh unit of Berserkers, so all three of their hit points very much in effect, and the huge amount of damage they can deal with those hooked swords of theirs going to be a real problem, with Nazkai also on the way. Trebuchet fire coming from just over there as well. I mean, this is a good opportunity for Arthedain to actually use this trebuchet fire, because there's such a dense concentration of Uruk-hai on this front line that, yeah, these are really good shots. Bit of friendly fire as well, but more positives than negatives to take away from the Arthedain artillery use so far. Dunedain Rangers are in behind enemy lines here. I don't know how good a shot they are getting, but, and also now that they've revealed themselves, they are also getting rinsed by enemy arrow fire, including, I believe, yeah, Alert's hunting pack in position. Continuously getting units in behind enemy lines, though, are Isengard, Uruk-hai Reavers and Raiders, and it's only a matter of time, surely, before the complete collapse of this initial little Arthedain force trying to perhaps escape along the road. Maybe that's what the scenario was going for, trying to escape to warn the rest of the kingdom that Isengard are coming. They are not going to be able to do so, but maybe they can defeat the army outright as a result of the sacrifices they're making, because there's a lot of missile fire coming in here. Nice hit there from the trebuchet again. Snaga skirmishers, the Isengard answer to the bandits that Arthedain have brought to proceedings. These pikemen continuing to take damage from the Evan March up on the hill. I mean, that is the saving grace here for Isengard. A lot of this arrow fire that they are taking is not the highest quality. Their armour is going to be able to mitigate a fair amount of that damage, but yeah, Arthedain now completely crumbling in the face of overwhelming opposition from Isengard. Another really nice hit from the trebuchet, though. Whether this is going to be enough to make up the difference as the battle goes on, we shall have to wait and see. Dunedain scouts continuing to shoot back, kiting around the map. I don't know how much damage a depleted unit of horse archers is going to do, but they're going after the right targets, actually. Uruk-hai Reavers, vulnerable to this sort of thing, killing off as many as they can. Numbers going to be an important aspect of this fight as it continues. Dunlending veterans moving up, going axe to axe with a very depleted unit of Dunedain Peacekeepers. Wojciech's Dunlanders leading the way as they now start to make their way into the more traditional defence that Arthedain are going to be putting on as they dig into the hill, but they're going to be moving backwards, trying to find a better place to stand than the initial layer. Need to be quick, though, otherwise some of these units are going to get caught cold. Uruk-hai infantry, will they catch those Evan Marchers? No, it doesn't look like it. Even if they did, there's going to be some more units ready and waiting. Still some horse archers further down. Actually, no, not horse archers. Dunedain Mounted Company. They are getting hit by Froggy's archers there. He's going to be going around to another part of the Arthedain defence. Uruk-hai infantry moving backwards, not wanting to overextend themselves too much, given the presence that Arthedain have. You don't want to be sending individual units in to die for no good reason. Dunedain Peacekeepers now turning around to meet the Dunlending veterans directly. But again, the Dunlanders have got such a heavy numbers advantage at this point that they will win this fight unless there are reinforcements forthcoming. The Marchers just in behind. And moving a little bit further backwards. I mean, stuff like the dismounted Fornoster Rhine Knights would be really dominant against the Dunland units that Isengard have, but this so far is really the only probing assault that is going on. Arthedain maybe not too interested in reinforcing this line just now. Going to allow the arrow fire to try and fill the role of reinforcements. The Pikes continuing to push aggressively forward, but I mean, it is going to be about momentum, I suppose, for Isengard. They can carry that momentum that they have from ploughing through that Arthedain army down there. But the map is so strung out that it's going to be difficult for them to do that. Urukai infantry moving forward, there's still bandits. Things are a little bit spread out here for Arthedain, but maybe that's by design. There's a lot of ground for them to cover after all, and they still have that trebuchet. Let's not forget that Isengard themselves have artillery pieces, whereas Isengard ballistas, or ballists there I should say, could prove to be very, very useful as we move into the latter stages of this battle. Having them archers continuing to fire down. I mean, this is relatively low quality ammunition, but it's coming in high volumes here into the Isengard ranks. You can start to see as well Isengard crossbowmen starting to move forward. I mean, between crossbows and pikes, this is definitely a worthwhile thing to, here we go, with the ballista, worthwhile thing to shoot, but the Isengard ballista also moving in. You can see the thick projectiles that these Isengard ballistas have make it a much more reliable anti-unit weapon than the regular ballista, especially when you're trying to target down something dangerous like the Anuminous Gate Guards. I'll still have Avendym Spearmen over here. More damage being done, but most of it just basic Avendym Spearmen. Arthedain won't necessarily mind that too much, but there's not really any cover they can take from the Isengard ballista short of completely retreating from this location. Nothing of Avendym archers that are shooting. What are they shooting at though? Crossbowmen, by the looks of things. Crossbows are actually firing back at something as well. Firing into enemy archers. Maybe not the best use of the Urukai crossbowmen here from Wojciech. Sort of thing that you want to be using against infantry units to really hammer home the dominance that Isengard could have in a pure melee engagement against Arthedain. Arthedain marksmen getting involved. The armour upgrade won't help them too much with its crossbow bolts they're taking, but going to be continuing to do damage here against the Isengard forces. I feel my voice start to abandon me a little bit. I hope that it lasts for the rest of this battle at the very least. There's a huge presence here from Isengard as Morris and Eclipse start to push their way forwards, readying an assault. Dunedain Trollslayers moving back, trying to avoid the pikemen. When they actually do turn around and charge back in, I mean, that's an interesting duke. It does mean that armour piercing, I mean, with how spread out the pikes are, Dunedain Trollslayer is going to be able to get in and amongst the pikemen and rip them limb from limb, really. Bandits in and amongst them as well, which pikes, when you take away their formation, are a little bit vulnerable, but not so vulnerable that bandits are going to be too much of a concern for them in melee. Trebuchet fire, I mean, ooh, that is a really fortuitous hit. Ripping through the Urukai crossmen, getting some snagger in for good measure as well. Isengard's starting to move in. I mean, this is a relatively wide section that Arthedain have to try and defend, so this might be the best position for Isengard to try and effect some sort of advance, but in doing so you can already see the projectiles just flying back and forth from both sides, but because of the angles they're going to be more effective from Arthedain, which is exactly the sort of thing they need to override the quality advantage Isengard have in melee. It is a 4v4 though this, so Arthedain won't have to get KD ratios that are completely ridiculous in order to win the fight. Isengard maybe not moving forward in enough numbers here as this initial assault is shaken in parts. They need to be careful not to... Trebuchet starting to hit Froggy as well. Froggy taking his time to move into position. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. Getting his Urukai archers in as well just to try and skirmish with Arthedain, but it's not the sort of thing that's going to be terribly effective because Arthedain won't mind skirmishing with stuff like the Avendym archers, and it's the sort of thing they're going to be really quite comfortable with. So I don't know if Isengard are necessarily going to gain anything from this kind of warfare. I think they're going to have to try and be a little bit more forthright, a little bit more aggressive in the way that his allies are going to be over on the other side. But I say that, Wojciech, maybe a little bit less so. than Eclipse and Morris. This is a very full-blooded assault now, though, with more Uruk-hai infantry moving forward. The Trolls, which we saw earlier, now coming back for a round 2, trying to get into the Illuminous Gate Guards, which is the right thing to do, but dismounted Knights of Illuminas moving in. I mean, they are bloodied here at this point, the Trolls. They've only got so much left in them. Snaga Skirmishers routing as a result of a direct hit from the Trebuchet. And also some of the more depleted Uruk-hai infantry now starting to run for the hills as well. Raiders, and yeah, I mean, Arthedain starting to gain a little bit of momentum in the melee fight here. Need to be careful not to overextend themselves, though, and die on the end of those Berserkers' swords. Another good hit, more Uruk-hai infantry running for the hills. Guards of Orthanc moving forward to try and shore things up. I mean, the good thing about the Uruk-hai Berserkers is their locked morale. They will fight until death, which may very well be quite necessary here, as morale shocks, clearly what Arthedain are going for with their artillery, trying to add some fire arrows to the mix to push these Isengard units over the edge and rout. Uruk-hai pikemen moving up. Infantry are there. A very depleted unit of Dunedain Rangers, but not so depleted that their DPS is going to be the sort of thing that Isengard can afford to just allow on the field. Bit of friendly fire, that's the sort of thing that Arthedain can't really afford too much more of. Uruk-hai Raiders, though, I mean, they'll be fairly comfortable in melee against stuff like Uruk-hai Raiders, but it's the quality that's folded into this assault they'll be a little bit more worried about. Trolls moving forward again, perhaps. Not really any good opportunities for the Trolls to be really dominant, though. There's plenty of those heavy swordsmen from Arthedain throughout the front line. And that's the sort of unit which can be quite effective against this monstrous infantry. Uruk-hai Raiders wavering as a result of the Trebuchet fire. Yeah, and immediately, I mean, not only, perhaps less so the heavy swordsmen, the Troll Slayers in particular, the clue being in the name, are going to be really, really good against those Trolls of the White Hand. Armour piercing damage as well as just being really high in terms of base damage, but the Trolls trying to push their way through the lines. They can interrupt the Arthedain marksman, I suppose. Any other assaults happening now? I mean, Wojciech is now moving forward. Evendim Spearmen kind of pointing the wrong way. Evendim Archers as well. These basic Arthedain Spears are not going to be good enough to defeat Uruk-hai infantry in melee, unfortunately for them. Javelins thudding into the Arthedain ranks. There are the Snaga Uruk-hai archers moving forward. Arthedain marksmen as well. Forward come the seldom seen unit, the Dunlending Berserkers. Bit of armour piercing certainly wouldn't go amiss against these Arthedain units. Uruk-hai archers trying to shoot into what targets they can. What's going on with Froggy's assault? Still relatively slow, still the Uruk-hai archers trying to do that slower approach. Playing tag with the enemy a little bit. There is a melee engagement happening though. Powerful Baneguard going up against the Arthedain Man-at-Arms. I mean, the Baneguard should do pretty well against the Arthedain Man-at-Arms, to be honest. But the Baneguard are also getting shot in the back by Evendim Archers, which is going to do their life expectancy no favours whatsoever. There's also black streaks on the on that ammunition, so using armour-piercing arrows on something like Baneguard maybe isn't the best of ideas. Sort of thing which maybe you should be saving for later on. Sort of thing which can really get you out of jail against a unit like the Nazkai when all else fails, but they're still killing units, I suppose. Another unit of Baneguard supporting a very depleted unit of veterans, but Peacekeepers should be enough to finish off this token effort of an assault. There are Uruk-hai pikemen ready and waiting to support, which would prove to be a little bit more of a problem. Still not moving up this middle lane, which is interesting because there doesn't seem to be much from Arthedain here that would stop an Isengard assault there. So maybe they should move that way. Instead, Wojciech is throwing more units into this assault over here. Combination of the more aggressive Dunlanders and the more solid Uruk-hai going up against this front line from Arthedain, which is receiving more reinforcements now, more high quality reinforcements. Stuff like the Peacekeepers will be enough to help prop up the basic spears. Who might that be, I wonder? as those javelins continue to find their marks. Over here, and you can see that in spite of the fact they've been taking a lot of damage over here, Isengard, they are weathering the storm, and ultimately they are gaining the upper hand in this fight now. Arthedain running out of steam from a pure melee perspective. Archers still continuing to do damage, but no longer at the rate that would be enough to save this front line in the long run. And again, the presence of pikes in this front line is going to be a real problem for them. Dunedain Rangers and Evandem Archers trying to do the damage necessary. Narskaya moving forward now though. Dunedain Troll Slayers and Dismounted Knights with so plenty of quality over here in the middle, but Isengard continuing to rush forwards. Fire arrows may actually prove to be more damaging to Arthedain's chance of holding on in the long run here, as their front line starts to get overrun. A few stray fire arrows from their own men might be enough to actually rout them via friendly fire. Trebuchet crew with some dismounted Fornoster Rhine Knights as well, I should say. But there's Narskaya in here. There's a few supporting pikes, more supporting armour piercing from the Vanguard. Narskaya just wandering through gaps in the line at this point. Arthedain starting to struggle. It might be an idea at this point to try and retreat, especially now over here with Wojciech also overrunning the lines. Berserkers. And this is one of those transitional phases in the battle where you do worry about the defenders slightly. The momentum, certainly with Isengard on both front lines, and gaps are being found all over the place in the defences that the defenders have set up. Arrowfire continuing to try and do its thing, but they might want to get these Evandem Archers out of here, but they're not going to be able to in time. Needless to say, Evandem Archers are not going to be the match of Uruk-hai Berserkers in melee. Elsewhere, Sniper Skirmishers. Arthedain Man-at-Arms trying to block the advanced Dunedain Troll Slayers, doing damage to Pikemen, Berserkers and Snaga, and that is going to be enough to rout the Snaga as the Arthedain Man-at-Arms try and hold them at bay, but Uruk-hai Berserkers are the perfect unit for dealing with something like the Arthedain Man-at-Arms, as we have seen. Meanwhile, over here, over yonder, Froggy's Uruk-hai Infantry moving in. And again, the quality is what's going to be the difference here against the Evandem Spearman. They'll be able to do that damage. It'll take them a little while, but the overall outcome of that fight is not going to be in question. Over here, though, with the archer support from Tundra's Fox, in fact it is just Tundra's Fox over here as well. I thought there were some units from J, but yeah, with the archer support, things are a little bit more in question over here. Froggy should have the numbers to keep up this assault, however, and it may very well go the same way as the attack we saw on the other side, where Isengard take an initial pounding from the ranged units, but as time wears on, they are able to seize control. Speaking of which, over here, Arthedain continuing to try and hold on to front lines, and I mean, they're going to do so against these Uruk-hai pikemen, but just in behind over here you can see that Isengard are going to be surrounding numerous elements of these front lines. Dunedain Rangers scurrying into place. I mean, these Dunedain Peacekeepers are here. There goes an Arthedain General at the hands of the Vanguard. Not entirely sure whose that was. It's not over here though, that's for sure. Somewhere over here perhaps? Nope, but these Arthedain Man-at-Arms are wavering, unsurprisingly, in the face of these Berserkers. Uruk-hai Archers moving forwards. Uruk-hai Berserkers still here. I mean, carnage over on this front line. Time will tell whether this engagement was too costly for Isengard or not, because while they have been victorious, it's cost them a lot of manpower. Crossbows shooting into Arthedain as they try to retreat. The Guards of Orthanc leading the way to try and prevent them from doing so. They've taken a lot of damage as well, though. Guards of Orthanc are a very solid unit. To see them so depleted and bloodied is a sign of how brutal that front line was for the attackers. Not too much in the way of trebuchets to rely upon anymore, but again, we'll only really know at the end of the battle whether the trebuchets have been used to good enough effect. Berserkers, Uruk-hai Archers, Dunedain Rangers starting to fire, and this is a worthwhile target. There are Berserkers in there who are, I mean, they're going to do their best to defend. They're going to do their best to hold on. They're going to do their best to hold on. They're going to do their best to hold on. They're going to do their best to hold on. They're going to do their best to hold on. They're going to do their best to hold on. They're going to do their best to hold on. They're going to do their best to hold on. They're going to do their best to hold on. They're going to do their best to hold on. They're going to do their best to hold on. They're going to do their best to hold on. They're going to do their best to hold on. They're going to do their best to hold on. They're going to do their best to hold on. They're going to do their best to hold on. They're going to do their best to hold on. They're going to do their best to hold on. They're going to do their best to hold on. They're going to do their best to hold on. They're going to do their b weak to arrow fire, but there's also other units. Enough of a blob for Rangers to be a good choice. These units still being held up on these Peacekeepers. There's a few Dunlanders in here as well, trying to add some armor-piercing damage, but Dunedain better placed than the other units in the Arthedain roster to deal with that because of their better melee defense. And also they in turn, those single-handed axemen, are going to be ideal for cutting through the very low overall defence that the Berserkers bring to the table. The Dunlending Berserkers anyway. Wardens of the North looking like they're out of ammunition. Bloodied up slightly, but with their long swords, they're a very good unit in melee. This defence is a little bit chaotic. I mean, surely there are gaps that Isengard can exploit. They haven't done so to a huge extent yet. Ooh, that may very well have been very costly friendly fire. Hitting centre mass of those Evendim Spearmen. Not the sort of thing that a basic unit like this can sustain too much of before they think of routing. Lots of arrow fire coming forward though. Targeting down the right things. Lurt's hunting pack trying to get into place. Urukai Pikemen. Urukai Reavers. Look on high. Was the engagement. I mean, are Isengard actually pushing through here with any sort of gusto? No, they're going to allow what remains of those Arthedain units to retreat, although I don't think there's actually that many of them. 7 marksmen, 103 marksmen. Where will they actually make their final stand? Probably over there on that peak, I would imagine, is where we're going to ultimately end up. The Isengard Ballista trying to hit, but not really the angle on them. Those Berserkers really taking a beating. Lurt's hunting pack now shooting into the backs of the defenders over there. Wardens of the North turning around and going toe-to-toe with the Nazkai. A real battle of the Titans here. You'd give the edge to the Nazkai if both units were completely healthy. They are a dedicated melee unit and that armor piercing is really, really good, but even still, Wardens of the North, one of the few units that won't fold like wet tissue paper in the face of the Nazkai. These are good hits. May only be into basic Arthedain marksmen, but they're going to do a lot of damage if that sort of artillery fire keeps up. Meanwhile, over here, I thought Froggy would be the one to actually go on to be victorious in this fight, but not so much. Arthedain counter-attacking. Evendim Spearmen and Dunedain Troll Slayers wrapping around this Isengard formation, and Arthedain going to get a bit of a victory here in this part of the map. Moving elsewhere, this perhaps is where more of Froggy's efforts are being concentrated, but perhaps not. I mean, those Nazkai getting absolutely obliterated by the Wardens of the North's armor-piercing arrows, and I have to say, so far, things haven't necessarily gone to code for Froggy. And Arthedain will certainly take some encouragement from that. 4 Nosterine defenders, actually, so there are some of those folded in with the Evendim Spearmen, which is very, very confusing because they both have the same model and the Evendim Spearmen are upgraded. Urukai Infantry fighting something. Snaga Skirmishers trying to get into place here. I think Froggy needs to be a little bit more all-in at this point, because if he's not, he's going to run the risk of outright losing on this flank, which will certainly do his team's chances no favours. Dunlending Clansmen engaging the Arthedain Marksman melee, going to prevent more of these Arthedain missiles from doing their thing, which so far in the battle has been a cause for concern. Urukai Infantry on the way forwards. Isengard still with an overwhelming numbers advantage in parts of the field, but it is mainly here in the middle now that they have this. Arthedain men-at-arms, will they rout as they try to escape the clutches of the Nazkai? Yes, they will. Rotting meat being utilised, but you're very unlikely to rout Isengard without them getting any sort of pressure in melee. More Ballistae moving forward, but is it worth the Ballista's time to go after that Trebuchet if it's only rotting meat that they have left available to them? Probably not. Urukai Pikemen on the way forwards. Lurt's hunting pack. Yeah, Arthedain starting to retreat now. In spite of the fact that they have done really well against Isengard over here, they can't afford to be completely cut off from their allies. Really taking a beating though, Froggy. Combination of the trebuchet and the continued support of the steel bows that the Wardens of the North utilise. What are they actually firing at, however? Going after another unit of Nazkai, definitely worthwhile. Getting them bloodied up, weakening them for the later game. Continuing to do their thing. Arthedain units here, getting ready to retreat perhaps. They're going to use the Arthedain marksmen as a rear guard. I mean, it's only Dunlending clansmen they're facing off against, but surely more units are going to be on the way. Scarier units. Trebuchet crew fighting against Uruk-hai archers. Again, a bit of a wet noodle contest between these two units when it comes to a melee force, but there are 11 berserkers in there, which is going to be enough to make sure the Trebuchet crew are killed. You never know. We've seen battles in the past where 42 Trebuchet crew would have been the difference maker. Don't know whether that will be the case this time. 14 berserkers. There's a lot of red arrows down there, but surely it's routing units indeed. Scurrying around all over the place. Isengard ballista moving forwards, 2 of them. Will this artillery advantage Isengard now hold be another key factor as we move forwards in this battle? It's still a very chaotic battlefield, to be honest with you. You can see that Arthedain are sort of readying their final stand, but there are several elements that are still significantly further back down the hill. And chaos like this usually favours the attackers, you have to say. Thunderous Fox moving forward. Maybe he senses the opportunity to try and kill off Froggy's army in its entirety. Wardens of the North facing off against the damage to Nazkai. With a little bit of support from the Arthedain man-at-arms, is that going to be enough for them to maintain an advantage here? Isengard ballista crew moving forward, scimitars in hand. Victory almost a certainty. Hamilton archers doing their thing still, facing off against the Uruk-hai crossbows in melee. And further back, Evendom spearmen charging, spears down, and this is a fight that they will be dominant in melee against the Snaga skirmishers, but you can hear the whistle of crossbow bolts overhead. Did they literally just run out of ammunition? They pulled out their melee weapons, so perhaps they are. Snaga will try to leave melee. Is Froggy going to try and retreat a bit more? Because, I mean, he's not going to win this fight anymore, I don't think. Thunderous Fox wants to commit forward more units. I think he can actually completely destroy Froggy. But in so doing, the time that he spends doing that may leave him cut off from retreat. So I'm not sure. What is the right move here? Dunedain Trollslayers lying in wait. A few more units over here. Dunedain Peacekeepers going toe-to-toe with the Dunlending Berserkers, and that will be a fight that the Dunedain most certainly win. Especially with the numbers being what they are. Isengard moving forward. I mean, Isengard, if they can take control of this bit of terrain here, will cut off the rest of the Arthedain forces that are further down the hill. But maybe that's why Thunderous Fox is going all in on Froggy with the units that he has. Because he knows he can't retreat, so he's going to try and be as useful as he possibly can. Powerful Baneguard and Uruk-hai pikemen moving forward, going up against the upgraded Arthedain pikemen. This could be a good thing for Arthedain as well. They've made, in spite of the fact they don't really have a ton of really upper end missiles to use in this battle, they've made really good use of their Evendom archers and Arthedain marksmen so far in this fight, I think. And they will continue to do so against those Uruk-hai. I mean, there's friendly fire and fire that's hitting its intended target from the Isengard ballista at this point. So mutually assured destruction here. Artillery pieces most certainly don't discriminate. Uruk-hai crossbows, what are they firing at though? Nothing. Stopped firing. Dunedain Troll Slayers getting into melee now. Seeing an opportunity to close in with the Nazkai. Lurt's hunting pack moving forward as well. I mean, the Dunedain Troll Slayers are good, but it's only a matter of time before Isengard overwhelm this pocket of resistance as well. Is that so? Further down the hill, Avondin Spearman defeat is a distinct possibility, getting overrun. I mean, there are more Uruk-hai crossbowmen, but you'd still kind of expect the Avondin Spearman to be able to pull out the victory there in melee, but I guess not. Snaga skirmishers being of great help. Arthedain, the noose tightens around Froggy's army. And they are going to be able to finish them off completely. And this will also leave a lot of these Arthedain units as a problem that Isengard need to consider moving forward, because while they are cut off from linking up with the units that are forming the final stand at the summit of the hill, they can't completely ignore them, otherwise Isengard will in effect find themselves surrounded. What will Froggy do now? He doesn't have much to work with. There are some Uruk-hai pikemen from Goychek, but that is not going to be enough. Far too little, far too late. There goes another Arthedain general though. They have been the ones losing their command structure. I say that as soon as an Isengard general loses. I was about to say Isengard haven't lost a single general yet, but now they have. I don't really know for which side morale is going to be a bigger problem. I guess if the Isengard ballistas still have ballistae, still have ammunition, then probably it's going to be more of a problem for Arthedain, even though they're the defenders, but I guess it's going to be tit for tat here. Neither side is going to be feeling too confident that they have the outright morale advantage. Dunedain Peacekeepers fighting uphill into the Lurt's hunting pack, who can certainly look after themselves in melee, but they are outnumbered and they are going up against a unit that can kick out some very decent damage. Dunedain Troll Slayers are going to retreat. They're going to be able to get away, 51 of them. Uruk-hai pikemen are going to try and block their retreat. Will they be successful? And 51 Troll Slayers is exactly the sort of thing you really want to save if you can. There goes another Arthedain general though. Still not seeing much from there, and there is another avenue this way that Isengard have been utilising, but it's been with a force that maybe isn't super dominant, and that's going to be the problem. Even though they've killed off yet another Arthedain general, I don't think Isengard are going to win over here. Those javelins, making as good a use of those Snaga as they possibly can. But Arthedain emptying the final stand essentially to finish off. I mean, they would have been better off waiting here, I think, Isengard. There goes another general, this time from Isengard, getting bisected by an axe. But I think they would have been better off waiting until they were ready to attack from the other side. More of a complete defence it would have been then. Arthedain marksman. Dismounted Knights for Nunas pushing through. Able to silence the Snaga skirmishers now. And they will of course be killed off in melee relatively easily. By a unit as strong as this. Well, Arthedain continue to scour the base of the hill over here for these Isengard forces that still lurk in the trees. That's going to be it for the Uruk-hai pikemen. They are going to fight to the death, but all that's really going to do is buy a little bit of time, as Arthedain will now try to move back and into defensive shape. So Isengard, while they're going to win in the middle, the two flanks looking like they could go Arthedain's way fairly heftily. What do they do from here, Isengard? I mean, it's a chaotic fight, but it hasn't necessarily favoured Isengard 100% of the time, which is interesting. And now, actually, Tundra's Fox does have the opportunity to maybe retreat and regroup with his allies. Isengard with their backs to the wall over here. It's a good thing Medieval 2 doesn't have mechanics where units can be pushed off cliffs and fall to their doom. Otherwise, that would be exactly what would be happening to the Nazg and Uruk-hai. I wonder if the Nazg would count as a separate type of orc entirely, or whether they are just really bulky Uruk-hai. I guess the Berserkers still count as Uruk-hai, so I suppose they must be. Dunedain Rangers moving in. This should be enough to rout the Snaga skirmishers, you would think. Not instantly. Maybe showing a little bit more mental fortitude than I was willing to give them credit for. They're still fighting. How is such a thing even possible? There they go. Took longer than I thought, though. Who knew? The courage of Snaga. Victory almost assured for Arthedain there. Well, it is going to be assured. There's no Isengard reinforcements anywhere near enough to being close enough to save them. High Crossman, I have to say, it's not looking great for Isengard, just taking a general stock of the battlefield. They're looking stretched. I mean, this force over here, what have they got? Dunlending veterans. Dunedain peacekeepers are going to be... Surely they're going to be destroyed here. Pikemen closing in. Yeah, and there they go, they rout. Even the mighty Dunedain are not going to be sticking around in this sort of fight. There isn't really a huge amount of quality over here from Isengard. It's over here. Dunedain Troll Slayers finishing off this Lurtz Hunting Pack. And yeah, Isengard looking very stretched at the moment. If I had to hazard a guess at who I thought was going to go on to win based on the positions, it'd probably be Arthedain. Lurtz Hunting Pack are going to try and escape, but they're going to take a lot of damage while they do so. They're taking arrow fire, they're surrounded. The Dunedain Troll Slayers are capable of chucking out a lot of damage, as we've already seen in this battle. Arthedain Marksman. Still some Lurtz Hunting Pack lurking around. Very depleted Isengard units, one Uruk-hai infantry. There goes an Isengard general at the hands of an Evendim archer. Most unlikely of heroes in that situation. They are going to continue to move forward. Yeah, I mean, Arthedain have got the momentum in this fight at this point. And in fact, Isengard, I think they might actually be setting up a defensive position. A very bizarre situation for them to be in, no doubt. Still trying to finish off what remains of these Nazkai. There's only 9 of them remaining. And we're just in time to see yet another general fall, another Isengard general. What will Arthedain do from here? Move forwards. I mean, yeah. Let's have a look at the relative kill counts. Isengard 2% behind. I mean, that's not an insurmountable amount by any means, but I don't know. Terrain, 7 Arthedain Marksmen. Just doing a little bit of damage here and there. Every kill going to be very useful. If they still have a bit of ammunition on this ballista, that could be a real game changer for Isengard. We've got 2 ballistas here. One of which certainly has ammunition because they're loading it. Will they get a good hit? Marksmen are right there. They are going to shoot point blank, and that is a good hit. Devastating, that unit. I mean, not the strongest unit individually, but they do need to just start killing off a lot of this Arthedain. A lot of these Arthedain numbers. They don't really need to shoot into it any more than they already have done. The Lurtz Hunting Pack should be enough to finish them off in melee. Probably going to rout, aren't they? Yeah. Routing almost immediately. And the battle has become very stretched at this point. Arthedain continuing to use their archers to as good effect as they are able to. Shooting into the Uruk-hai pikemen. Going to be reliant on their armour to bail them out a bit. And over here, Arthedain, where are they going, I wonder? We are marching towards the final 10,000 frames, but I'm just not sure where they're going to be headed. Are we going to see a role reversal here? Will Isengard become the defenders? I think they're going to have to become the defenders if they're going to have any sort of chance at victory in this fight. But I mean, Arthedain, I suppose they're under no obligation to humour Isengard in that respect. They are the defenders overall in this battle, after all. It is up to Isengard to try and take the hill. They are the invaders here. I guess we'll go up to ×2 speed here. while this sorts itself out. A bizarre battle indeed. They continue to shoot with what limited ammunition both sides still have. There is a melee fight going on. Is it a significant one? I mean, yeah, it is. 61 Lurtz hunting pack. That's not a... That's one of the most significant forces that's still left on the field, but Warns of the North are coming in. Reinforcements of all kinds, Dunedain Trollslayers are going to try and surround them. The Lurtz hunting pack are going to wriggle away before their fate can be delivered to them. Still, this depleted unit of archers continues to do its thing. 14 Dunlanding Berserkers moving around to try and make something happen. Eisen Ballista crew. Whatever happened to that other... I mean, the Arthedain force is making its way around, slowly but surely. The force from DFJ. I mean, this is not really the relief force to bail out the Lurtz hunting pack they would have been hoping for, but it's better than nothing, I suppose. Axe is raised. They're going to get absolutely torn apart by the Warns of the North, though, unfortunately for them. The Lurtz hunting pack are not going to be able to get away from here either. It says victory is almost a certainty for them, though. And a big part of this might be that the Warns of the North are what was giving them that victory, and now a lot of these more depleted Arthedain units are starting to struggle. Yes, there are Dunedain Trollslayers in here, but there's only 9 of them remaining. The Ballista crew coming to the hunting pack's aid as well. At this point, just getting numbers forward would be helpful, but another very healthy unit of Evendim Spearmen who are wavering almost immediately. This is where the loss of the general could start to be a real problem for Arthedain, because they can't really afford for a unit of over 100 spears to rout from here. Wardens of the North. Victory seems certain. Isengard moving over to maybe block the... It's a rather long-winded advance this from Jay. Maybe taking a little bit too much time over this. It's going to allow Isengard to maybe concentrate their force and try and make something happen against, yet again, 82 Evendim Spearmen routing. The Dunlanders holding their nerve alongside the more elite Isengard units, not so much the Ballista crew, but certainly the hunting pack. And we are now into the final 10,000 frames. Arthedain Marksmen routing, Trollslayers are there. Yeah, not great that for Arthedain. And Isengard have been the ones that have been punished for maybe being a little bit too stretched, a little bit too pulled apart, not acting as a unit as much as they should have done. And the same could be true here of Arthedain moving into the late game, but some good damage being kicked out, once again, by some of those Arthedain archers, doing good damage to a unit they should rightfully be quite scared of in the late game, in pikemen. Do they have any pikes available to them as well, because that could be a real problem. Yeah, they do. They've got a fairly healthy unit of gate guards. Yeah, a bit of indecision here from Jay as well, because now he's moving back down this road. Not really sure what his plan is. I don't know if he knows what his plan is going to be. Go up to ×2 speed, because again, with how stretched things are, it's probably going to be a little while before another engagement happens. It's a good thing it's not King of the Hill, and there's a town centre on the hill. Otherwise, Isengard would be free to take it. Smarts and Knights are moving forward, Isengard moving back, so trying to regroup. We may very well be seeing, at long last really, a unified front from both sides as the final elements of both Isengard and Arthedain try to regroup with one another. Only 1% the difference now, so Isengard have narrowed the gap just a little bit. Have they narrowed it enough though? I don't know. I think Arthedain still have the quality as well. They've got numerous gate guards, 2 units of them. When you put those 2 units together, that's a healthy amount of really good quality pikeman. I mean, this could be really key as well. Do those crossbows still have ammunition? If they do, those crossbow bolts could be exactly the sort of tonic Isengard need. salve upon their wounds. I really don't know what's going on in this battle. Like, it's the movements of both armies at this point are genuinely quite bizarre. We're going to have to go up to times 6 speed to hasten the process of neither side really knowing what they want to do. Where are Arthedain going now? They're scurrying away. Going to this area maybe to set up a final stand. The Isengard ballista crew finishing off what remains of these Dunedain Rangers. Going to be absolutely run through by them. Not sure how I feel about this from Arthedain. I mean, this should be this should win them the battle, to be honest. But we shall have to wait and see. Isengard moving forward. The onus is on Isengard to move forward. They can't expect Arthedain to be sporting. Arthedain marksman getting into a good position as well to continue to shoot. Been a real difference maker in this fight so far. They'll continue to shoot, do damage to Isengard as they advance, and that's the sort of thing they can seldom afford at this point. 30 dismounted Knights of Illumina still there as well. But there's a lot of terrain where units can hide on this battlefield. This isn't really the heaviest woodland. You wouldn't really necessarily expect them to be able to hide here, but here they are. I really don't know why Jay's continuing to run away down here as well. Turn around and fight, you coward. Starting to get under my skin a little bit, get on my nerves. We're just going to times 6 speed through the rest of this. I think the cinematic portion of this fight is over, and when one side truly decides to test the other, we're going to see the fruits of their labour. Uruk-hai crossmen are going to be easily overrun here by the amount of Evendim spearmen that are on display. There's a few Uruk-hai berserkers, which is kind of impressive to still see berserkers at this late stage, considering that they have been utilised fairly heavily, bloodied and beaten up. Isengard move forward. It could be here if Jay throws this battle away because he's running away with some of his units. That would be one of the worst throws we've seen, I think. Not maybe as much as that one on Edoras, where Isengard very literally threw the battle away, but I don't know. The Numinous Gate Guards moving forward. Isengard continuing to commit what units they can, try and overwhelm this position. Dismounted Knights of Illumina coming back. The Numinous Gate Guards scurrying over. The addition of those Gate Guards should make it extremely difficult for Isengard to gain any traction in this fight, but trying to use their mass here, succeeding at using their mass as well, you have to say. Finally the penny drops and the rest of the units are coming over here. I don't know though, this is already a fairly ugly fight for Arthedain. There isn't anything left for Isengard though. I don't think they have anything left they can commit except for 5 Uruk-hai infantry, 4 Uruk-hai raiders, but they may as well throw everything in at this point. Throw the kitchen sink at it and hope that it's enough. It won't be, I don't think, but not for lack of trying. But it's been a weird and chaotic fight, this one. Marksmen trudging forward, players admitting defeat. And now finally we're seeing what we should have seen a little bit earlier. Both sides throwing everything they have left at one another. And yeah, this is where something like the Numinous Gate Guards are going to be worth their weight in gold, because they effectively guarantee the victory for Arthedain. Forward come those 5 Uruk-hai infantry, not going to be the same difference maker as over 50 pikemen unfortunately, but there's also those dismounted Knights of Illumina as well, so we are going to see a defender's victory, which has been a rare enough thing. Should make people happy, reasonably happy. I wonder why this battle was called Gold and Silver. There's definitely silver in Arthedain, but there's no gold in Isengard. Uruk-hai raiders running away. Final elements of the Isengard army clinging on. Close battle though, 2% the difference. This is the entirety of the Arthedain force that you can see left. What are you doing? What was that all about? Why did he do that? What a strange individual we have before us. I don't really know. Who's left? Hang on. There's one Isengard ballista crewman. There's nothing left from Arthedain, is there? Is there? Jay's army is running away. Oh, I see. Okay. So this is how it ends. Is it? WK's general kills off that crossbowman. Everyone is admitting defeat for bizarre reasons. And Arthedain win, I guess? I'm not really sure what to make of that. Arthedain win, as they should have done anyway, because of the amount of forces that Jay had left. I don't know why he admitted defeat. I guess they wanted to have that duel between those two units and put everything on the line there, almost like gambling to see if that general could defeat that one unit. But how bizarre. Either way, defenders victorious, Arthedain win. It was a really chaotic fight, this, and usually that favours the attackers. If this had been a 3v4 or something where the attackers had a numbers advantage in terms of the armies, then it certainly would have favoured them. But as it was a 4v4, it was more ambiguous as to whether that would be the case, and in the end it ended up favouring Arthedain, you have to say. And a big part of that, I think, is there were so many units spread out that Arthedain were just able to pick their targets with their ranged units really well, and that was always going to be the difference between victory and defeat for them. Obviously WK's army crushed underfoot relatively quickly, but that was by design. Just a chaotic scenario overall. So let's have a look and see what did the damage for the Isengard armies. The Nazkai doing very well in melee, which you kind of expect. Against a faction like Arthedain, most of their units are going to be more defensive, reliant on their armour, more of a backstop for stuff like cavalry and archers, and that's exactly the sort of foe that the Nazkai are going to absolutely chew through. Trolls doing pretty well, crossbowmen, fairly run-of-the-mill performance from them. The Lurtz Hunting Pack doing very well with those body-piercing projectiles, even though they were on the attack. Guards of Orthanc took a real beating, but they did their job. Plenty of kills for the Uruk-hai infantry. So perhaps unsurprisingly, what we're seeing here is Isengard were more dominant in the melee fight, but not enough to see them over the line. Unfortunately, Snaga Skirmish is doing reasonably well. Nazkai breaking 200 kills in this army as well. Baneguard doing okay. Less impressive performance from the rank and file infantry here. Again, Uruk-hai Berserkers, Trolls of the White Hand doing okay. Moving down to the third army, the Nazkai doing less well in this force, but the crossbows picking up the slack here. One of the units of pikes as well, breaking 200 kills is pretty impressive for a unit that does damage relatively slowly, and 211 kills on the Uruk-hai Berserkers as well. And the final Isengard force, I think this must have been Froggy's army because he struggled significantly more than his allies. Identical kills on his 2 units of crossbows. He had 2 units of Nazkai as well, which is kind of interesting, but they were introduced to the business end of those steel bows. Rest of the units really struggled though. So it was an interesting kind of fight. Really mixed, a real mixed bag for both sides, I think. And then we had that weirdness at the end, which I'm still not sure what to make of that, to be honest. But it is what it is, I suppose. So yeah, let me know in the comments what you thought of this rather strange scenario. And big thank you to Eclipse for sending this one in. Always good when new maps and scenarios are being created. I'm always happy to show them off as well. So yeah, big thank you to Eclipse as always. I'm sure that we'll be seeing more from him in the future as well, but for now I have run through my backlog of scenarios that he has given me. Moving forwards, the next battles that you can expect, the episodic series is going to be coming up, the 3 battles in a row, I should say, not in a line, but yeah, they are going to be the next ones that we see. There is also another Elven themed siege on Edoras, which I believe I'm going to be showing after that. It's not that long ago that we saw Edoras, but I think it's been long enough that I think, based on the theme that that battle has, that we can do that. So those are 4 replays we're going to be seeing on Reforged. Again, if I get a Silmarillion replay, I probably will push that to the front of a queue as well, because I do want to show off those 2 new factions over in Silmarillion as soon as I possibly can when I get a good replay of them. And then, as I mentioned in the recent channel update as well, Rise of Mordor content is going to be coming sooner rather than later, towards the tail end of this month. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Big thank you to Eclipse once again for sending the battle replay in and creating the scenario. Big thank you to all of the players that were a part of this weird and wonderful fight. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.